What is going on, guys? Today I'm going to be checking out the season 2024 cinematic Still Here. Still Here has to be along with Warriors, and there's another one. There's a third one there that I've seen the most requests to with League of Legends. I'm waiting on Warriors because I'm told it has Arcane aspects to it. I'm currently in the middle of watching Arcane, so I'm not touching it yet. But I knew for quite some time now that with this one being one of the latest cinematics being put out there, that this was gonna be the cinematic to like tie my League of Legends journey before finally posting my Arcane videos to YouTube. All right, guys, the time has finally come. Thank you so much for being patient with me. I'm just ready to hop right into it, so let's get to it.
Tomorrow is a hope, never a promise.
Wow, it looks so real.
Gripping with my cold hands, the shapes I used to take. Hollow like a strong man, but it's easier to
Oh, are those our people? Oh my gosh, wait, it's been so long. The one with the wings and they're together and it's from like Star Guardian. Yes, all right, is that them? Oh. Is that? Is that? Oh my gosh. That's not Aatrox, is it? Ah! Oh no.
It's in my blood, it's in my veins. Oh, it's in my blood, it's in my.
What is she doing? She's training him. Oh my god, look at her eyes. Oh no, wait, these are two females. They're not, I don't think they are from the Star Guardian.
Maybe it's a far stretch that I won't come undone.
Oh no, I don't like this.
To finish off what I've begun.
He drew a line, like, do not cross it.
With the strange daylight caught in our eyes.
The mystery. Oh. I like the music. I haven't commented on it yet. I don't know if I should know who that is. Is that Ponytail guy?
I'm still here.
It has to be Ponytail guy. He's old? I don't know if I'm totally butchering who these characters are at this point, you guys. I apologize. Oh, so beautiful. Ah! Oh, we're back to this guy.
It's in
Oh no, they did take him down. Oh no, he's okay. I don't think I know who this guy is. It's Kindred! Ah! Kindred is after you! Basically, you're gonna die! Don't fight it! Oh! Stop! You can't! You can't! They're like the Grim Reaper! Basically, they're saying, like, your time has come. I can't believe it, you guys! Kindred!
I'm still here.
How did Kendrick miss? Oh! What is this? Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know who this is. I don't think I do. What was that? So Kindred did not take his life? You know what? I'm glad I'm about to watch this like explanation video to like get my facts straight. But I apologize. Like I was so into the storytelling and like understanding who the characters were that I couldn't appreciate the music for what it was. But the parts that I did catch, it just sounded like it went well with the video. I didn't catch any of the lyrics though, so I'm not even gonna front about that. I apologize. Like that's something I'll go back and like have to actually read because stop that scene with like Kindred. Yeah, no, I'd be a fool if I'm not gonna go back and rewatch that at some point in the day. But okay, cool. Let's go watch this explanation video next.
If you watch the new Still Here cinematic and you thought to yourself, that was cool, I still have no idea what happened, you would not be alone. And that's most likely because you don't know the ins and outs of League's lore, which I can assure you is totally normal. Most people are too lazy to read. And it just so happens to be that not only is Still Here our first League cinematic that is fully canon from the get-go, but also the cinematic is an absolute love letter to League's lore community. Because it is not only full of interesting details, but it is also overflowing with lore references. So no matter if you wonder why Kale and Morgana look different, why Yasuo is
It is them, right? No, Kale? I hate that I don't no, I don't think that was their names from Star Guardian. Kale is from Pentakill, no? Or is that a different character now?
So no matter if you wonder why Kale and Morgana look different, why Yasuo is old now, or if you don't even play League and you just saw a cool cinematic and you want to learn about it, this video should help with that. So
Perfect.
let's explain what exactly happened in League's newest cinematic.
Let's do it.
Here. Right at the beginning, you can hear a quote. Tomorrow is a hope, never a promise. Which came
That's
from
Kindred, right?
who are the twin deathly spirits, also known as the Lamb and the Wolf, who very simply put, in League's universe, represent death. They are sort of like the Grim Reaper. After which the cinematic starts with a cut into the Freljord, where, after a fierce battle shown by the number of soldiers scattered around, the barbarian king Tryndamere was finally brought to his knees. His enemies are most likely the Wintersclaw tribe, because as you'll see, this entire scene happens in the present times. In the second shot, you can see that his very iconic helmet had fallen off. You can actually see it here in the cinematic. After which, Tryndamere looks up at the brink of his strength, and he sees the faint silhouette of a figure with a bow. Of course, this is referencing the lamb, indicating that death had come for him. Though, as you'll see later, there is more than one twist to this. In the next scene, we actually travel to the past. Specifically, here we can see ancient Demacia. This was after Demacia was founded as a safe haven from magic, but before the nation became a haven for racists against magic, since most of the really bad hatred was fueled by the conflict between Kale and Morgana, which would happen later. This also means that at this point, Demacia has not progressed that far with the research of Petricite, which is the pale stone.
How have you guys like mentioned Kale or Morgana? Like now I'm so lost. It would have been so dope if they were the other people, or were like the Star Guardians. Their skin, was it like this? Like they had skins of these people
that can absorb magic. And as a result, if you look at the buildings here, you can see they do not resemble the white buildings just yet. Another thing to point out here is the Sea of Dead Soldiers. At first sight, you might think that all of these are ancient Demacians who just got slaughtered by the Darkin demigod Aatrox.
It was
That's
him!
not entirely the truth. Now, for the sake of simplicity, I am not going to explain what the
I'm like so proud of myself that yeah, I probably butchered like half of these characters, but at least I got Aatrox right.
Darkin are. Just know that they are corrupted, power-hungry demigods.
Oh, and Ponytail guy.
But we have to mention something for an important detail that happens later. The Darkin are demigods wielding blood magic who got banished inside their weapons. And
Right.
in Aatrox's case, he was bound inside his greatsword. The body you can see here is actually the body of a mortal who picked up the weapon, after which Aatrox
Right.
transformed them and dominated their mind.
Right,
You will
right,
see that
right.
this will get cool in just a moment. Anyway, next, as the scene cuts to Kale and Morgana. For only half a second, you can see that Morgana dropped a soldier. She almost disrespectfully threw him to the ground, which indicates that the soldier was not an ancient Demacian, but rather it was an enemy. So Aatrox didn't do all of this alone, which would make sense because the Darkin, such as Aatrox, used to build their own warbands of mortals by either enslaving them or by turning them into worshippers who believed they were gods. This was especially common during the Great Darkin Wars. Though this entire scene
I really
is
thought that they did the fight all their own.
So these barbaric marauders were just Aatrox's followers who attacked Demacia. After this, the scene
Gotcha.
shows us the early version of the Demacian armor. You can see they are yet to reach their glorious design with petrified steel. You can also see some hints of that in the armor scattered around the battlefield. And that's just as Kale and Morgana look up towards the sky where Aatrox is waiting. Now, of course, many
so
of you may know
intimidating.
that in-game, Kale has two swords, and Morgana is the mage who roots you for the entire game. So how come Kale has
Who
one
what's you?
sword and Morgana has the other one? Well, before Kale and Morgana became the twin aspects of justice, it was their mother, Mira, who held that title, and who served justice around the world while wielding a celestial blade. Later in her life, she decided to pass her powers onto her two twin daughters, and so she split her blade and she gave one half to each of them. It wasn't until the conflict a bit later that Morgana essentially quit her job as an aspect and she gave her blade to Kale. So at the time of this cinematic, the two still serve as the twin aspects.
He hadn't quit yet.
Wielding one half of a celestial blade. Another cool detail
Okay.
here is that as the two leap into the sky after Aatrox, you can see how Kale leads the charge with righteousness, with Morgana being the one who simply follows her. That's because Kale always looked up to their mother and what they fought for, while Morgana was always wary of their newfound powers. That's why in this entire cinematic, Morgana looks a bit more cautious. And before Morgana flies off into the distance too, for the last time, we have some time to see just how tribal Demacia looked at one point. Though even during this time, you can see that some of the buildings already started shaping up. After which, of course, the battle of Aatrox and the twin aspects starts.
crazy.
Unfortunately, there is not much to mention here. It is just a cool fight of flying demigods. But eventually, Aatrox smacks both of them to the ground. Their side of the fight starts looking grim, and Aatrox quickly follows them down. After his epic entry, you can actually see more of his followers charging forward in the background. After which, we get another cool reference. As Morgana stands up, she takes her sword and stabs it to the ground, leaving it behind as she focuses on her magic. This is foreshadowing for how later on Morgana gives up on the legacy of their mother. Now, of course, this wouldn't get a full approval from Kale, who always idealized their mother. And so, when she looks up with a frown, you can see the cinematic gives us a scene where Morgana is getting rid of her armor, all while being framed by the sword which she left behind. And
It's a
then, of
beautiful
course,
shot.
we get to see Morgana wield her dark magic. Now, I say dark, but in reality, it is celestial in origin. Morgana is not evil or anything like that. In fact, she is far better at protecting the people of Demacia than Kale. But that's a whole other story. And so she uses her celestial chains to bind Aatrox to the ground, an obvious reference to her Q ability in the game, which is followed by Kale picking up Morgana's sword. Again, this is not only a reference to what Kale looks like in-game, but it is also a reference to the fact that later down in her story, she does actually claim Morgana's sword. And by doing that, she fully embraces their mother's legacy. This is also
Gotcha.
why, when Kale walks by Morgana, she once again proves that she's the jerk and Morgana is the good one. When she gives her that disapproving look, it is not only directed at the fact that Morgana is using magic in Demacia. During those times, it was not ideal, but they were kinda forced into it. More than that, Kale is simply disappointed by the fact that Morgana would dare to leave their mother's sword behind. Especially if she's
Mm,
doing that to only focus on her magic. That's the real point of this scene. After which,
makes
even though
sense.
Morgana carried the crap out of this fight, using both blades, Kale uses her passive ability from the game. She calls upon the righteous flames and she burns Aatrox. The funny part here is that after this fight is over, Kale has to kinda awkwardly walk back to Morgana and give her the blade back. Because again, this scene is not how Kale claimed Morgana's sword. That happens later. Anyway, this is where the
Okay.
final awesome detail of the story happens. First of all, when the righteous flame burns Aatrox, for only a single second, you can see that Aatrox dropped his sword. Since he
Mm,
is a Darkin, this indicates that his soul went back to the blade. But what's
yeah.
interesting is that in this scene, it might be the first time Aatrox got ever sealed. The vast majority of the Darkin got sealed at the end of the Darkin War, where a celestial aspect came down and helped mortals seal everyone. But
Right.
some of the Darkin successfully fled away, and it was mentioned that Aatrox was one of them. And since this is happening
But
sometime after the Darkin Wars were already
how can
over,
you escape if you're like a weapon, though? Well, I mean, this is a whole world of magic, right? So let me not question that.
it is possible that this is the moment Aatrox got caught. Because we know
Mm.
that he had to get sealed eventually. Because later he gets picked up by another soldier and he gets his entire story with Tryndamere and Pantheon. So
Oh, so he's saying that the him being in the sword hasn't happened yet. Like this might have been like legit Airchox without a host.
this might be a lot more of a historical moment than most people might imagine. Anyway, even cooler than this are the last few frames from this scene. Once again, you can see a mysterious figure standing on one leg holding a bow, which is the iconic pose of the lamp representing death. This one has
How do
some
you catch something
absolutely
like that?
awesome implications. You see, the reason why Aatrox is extra evil and he is driven by slaughter is because he just wants to die. He hates his corrupted form, he hates the blood magic binding him. But it
Yeah.
just so happens to be that the Darkin are immortal. He is simply never going to escape this prison. His end always waits for him inside his weapon. Which is
Ugh.
why Aatrox simply wants to destroy the entire world. In his mind, that would be the only way to end this suffering. He can't be imprisoned if there is no prison. And because
I had watched the complete story of League of Legends. I was curious and I had asked in that video, and I haven't even edited yet, it's still the same day. But I had asked if like that mentality of him wiping out the earth was like the mentality of the void, but it doesn't seem to be the case that he has knowledge of that.
Because he's immortal, you can see the lamp in the fire, but she's simply watching him, not doing anything, because death can't claim Aatrox. And then the cinematic cuts to perhaps the most badass part. This is where all the major talks happened, so let's break it down. Of course, this scene takes us to Ionia. However, this is Ionia about 30 to 40 years in the future from the present days. Take it for what it is for now, we'll explain this time skip later. Here we can see some bandits burning a village. They are wearing masks, which of course are very popular in Ionia because they are connected to legends and demons. And at first, this made me think that these might be related to the Shadow Order. But as you'll see later, there is no shadow magic to be seen here. So these are far more likely to be related to Navori, which is a group of a little bit too patriotic Ionians, who are not afraid of attacking other Ionians if
Oh
they
no.
don't share their views. That's also why you can see that they are attacking other Ionians here. And after this, a mysterious man with a staff draws a line in the dirt. This is a hypothetical line as well as a literal one. It simply tells them to not go any further.
Right.
I love how this cinematic can tell us all of this without saying a word. A
Mm-hmm.
very common theme in this entire cinematic. Anyway, the two bandits laugh at the drawn line, we get a bit of a western standoff, after which, in an extremely subtle way, the cinematic reveals who this man is. Up to this point, when I first watched this, I wasn't sure if this was Elder Suma or Master Doran, but in fact, with a very slight tilt of his head, the scene reveals the scar on his face.
I hate that I
which
didn't recognize him by the
always
scar.
belonged to Yasuo. And this is where things get absolutely wild. When the bandits attack, you can see that Yasuo is not using his sword. In fact, his sword is nowhere to be seen around him. But what's more interesting, he is not even using the wind technique. And that's because Yasuo has a very clear purpose in how he's fighting them here. If you look closely, you can see that he's not killing anyone. And the reason for this is very simple. Yasuo has been murdering people with wind his entire life. And if you really look into his story, you might notice that the wind never brought anything good into his life. In fact, using the wind technique made other people suspect that he murdered his master. So the wind is the reason why he got exiled from his home. So it wouldn't be too far-fetched to believe that
Man, I watched this
Yasuo
story like at
was
the
simply
beginning of my
done
journey.
with using the wind, especially if it was taking lives. And you'll see that all of this is heavily reinforced in this entire scene. Of course, during this fight, without the wind or his blade, you can see the bandits actually manage to knock Yasuo down, where he faces the option to use the blade. Here people should notice that this is not Yasuo's blade. It is the blade of one of the bandits, which Yasuo knocked out of their hand earlier on.
Oh,
Now,
I
as
see.
Yasuo looks up, you can see the shock in his face. This is when he realized that without his wind technique, he can't protect this village. After
So
which the
crazy
cinematic
how
reveals
real
some
it
more
looks,
bandits
though.
with their boss in the middle. Although, unfortunately, this is entirely new character, so there is nothing to mention here. And then we got the beautiful scene where Yasuo faces his destiny. First of all, he still has the bottle on him, so he is still an alcoholic even at his respectable age. But also, he drops his staff, which indicates that he's done pretending to be someone he's not. After which the leader signals the archers, until the very last moment you can see that Yasuo does not want to do it. But
Oh,
eventually,
his face.
he picks up the blade to defend himself. And not only is he defending himself by
So
physically
sick.
using the blade, but also by using it to channel the wind and making the iconic wind wall. Here, the cinematic is actually showing us that he can use the wind wall on purpose. It is not just a cool reference to his ability in the game. This one has a wild payoff. We'll get to that one in a moment. Next, as Yasuo runs forward, he finally fully channels the wind. But again, notice that he is not killing anyone with it. He seemingly only glances past their enemies as they drop down without a single drop of blood. At the beginning, it is not clear what is exactly happening, but then there is the one that shows us what he's doing. Yasuo is using the wind to only knock the bandits down. He is not drawing blood, and he is not killing them. This is such a cool way to show us that even though Yasuo is once again forced to embrace the wind, he is not willing to use it to murder anyone.
Yeah,
He
that's
is
so
simply
cool.
done with killing. Another cool detail here is
Bravo.
that as Yasuo unleashes the wind, the binding on his arm actually rips, which is a reference to the fact that he's being unleashed again. After which, we get to the beautiful payoff. After a bit of chasing, at the end, Yasuo is faced with a cloud of arrows coming for him. This would be a sure kill to Yasuo as well as anyone around him. So I suspect that he channeled the tornado to knock the leader away on purpose. Again,
Oh.
he is not drawing blood, so he pushed him away so he wouldn't get hit. Which leads us to the payoff itself. As Yasuo looks up, he can see the cloud of arrows. which is something Yasuo has faced many times before. In fact, if you go back to the Climb cinematic from 5 years ago, you'll see that in Ionia he was once again faced with the exact same scenario. And what did he do? Of course, he summoned the Wind Wall to protect himself. Yes, I do believe this is what the Still Here cinematic is referencing. It is supposed to show us that Yasuo has a way out of this scenario. All he needs to do is to make a wind wall.
I don't remember what he
Does
did.
do it? No. We know that he can do it because the cinematic purposefully showed it to us earlier
He
on.
sacrificed himself?
But he still doesn't do it, and instead he willingly embraces his own end, which is indicated by the eyes of the wolf, which you can see in the distance, as well as the arrow of death coming from Lamb herself. So yes, Yasuo dies in this scene, and it is perhaps the most badass death he could have asked for. Now, here we need to point out an interesting thing. After this cinematic came out, there was an article by Dot Esports where they got to interview the creative directors of this cinematic. And here it was confirmed that this was a vision given to Yasuo by Kindred themselves. Also, if you go into the description of this cinematic, you'll see that this is a possible future. Which makes many people think that this is a what-if scenario. It is not Yasuo's real death, and it is just what could happen if Yasuo goes down a certain path.
Gotcha.
Well, I propose this is real. And Riot just chickened out. And they wanted to have the doors open just in case they want to do something else in the future. No, I think this is how Yasuo dies. In fact, he must die like this. See, based on a bunch of different stories, we know that while League of Legends only has one true timeline, there are ways for people to look across time into a bunch of different what-if scenarios. For example, Zillion's story is all about looking into a bunch of different potential outcomes of their universe. Though that doesn't mean that the other universes are real. They are just windows into possibilities. But that's what
That's
those
crazy.
are. They are hypothetical windows. They are not real. In the real timeline, a future foreseen cannot be changed. This was always heavily implied with Olaf. That's right, Olaf is a Freljordian warrior who got a prophecy from a shaman. A prophecy that one day he's gonna die of old age in his bed. Of course, Olaf refused to believe in that. He was certain he would die a glorious death in battle. And so, ever since that day, Olaf traveled around the world and he looked for the most powerful enemies to fight. From giant kraken worms which consumed entire ships, to undead kings with their undead armies. Olaf fought all of it, and most of them alone. And he always survived. Because every time he got close to death, a mysterious frenzy took over his body and he came out victorious. All because of his foreseen prophecy that said that he's gonna die old. And he can't change that. Which means that as long as he's fighting, he's immortal. Now, of course, I could always go back and retcon parts of Olaf's story. At least that would be for the sake of Yasuo getting a better story later on. But honestly, I kinda hope they don't. Because Yasuo's death is badass, and I hope they commit to it one day. Now, before we
I didn't realize he
Yasuo's
died.
storyline, some people theorized about the background here. You can see that all of this is happening beside some snowy mountains. Now, Ionia does have some snowy mountains in the north, but pine trees are not exactly typical for it. This is why some people believe that this entire scene is not happening in Ionia, but rather this is in the Freljord, which would indicate that during the second invasion of Ionia, which was an event teased to happen many times in the past, Noxus might either take over Ionia or entirely annihilate it, forcing Ionians to travel out into other regions. So who knows? Maybe this cinematic is also teasing a very dark future for Ionians. But finally, this takes us into the final part of
Noxus is from the Shurima story, no?
battle with death. It immediately starts with a cool detail. Just like the first scene started with a view looking down on Tryndamere, indicating him descending down
What a
towards
very
death,
beautiful way to
the
showcase
second
like the
part
fighting
starts with a
with
view
death,
up,
you know?
indicating that he's rising up again. Now, first things first, why is Tryndamere alive here? The reason is Aatrox again. Yes, later in his story, roughly about 1,000 years after his part with Kale and Morgana, Aatrox invades Tryndamere's tribe and he stabs Tryndamere with the blade, infusing him with blood magic in the process. In theory, it is possible that Aatrox did this to turn Tryndamere into a worthy host later on. The thing is, you know how Aatrox is immortal and always bound to his weapon? Yeah, by infusing Tryndamere with blood magic, he also cursed him with the Undying Rage, turning Tryndamere immortal too. We still don't know the limits of Tryndamere's immortality, but we
But
know
like, no. He said like the soldiers earlier were more worshippers, right? How did he say that he got like those people to fight for him earlier? Were they worshippers? So like he didn't do the same thing he did to this guy because they were like on the ground dead, or half of them were.
we know that Death is not gonna have a great time with him. So, this scene does not happen too long after the first one. You'll see there is some evidence that shows us that this is only a few minutes or seconds after the first scene. It all starts with a snowflake that falls down onto his blade and immediately gets absorbed into it. This is because Tryndamere is an Iceborn, and his blade is infused with true ice, which is a Freljordian magical kind of ice that originates from the Yeti magic. And then, after Tryndamere stands up, he gets ready to face death. And based on the fact that he is not surprised at all, this is not the first time he's doing this. Now, of course, the lamp is often not alone, and so Tryndamere also gets an epic fight with the wolf. The fight itself is absolutely gorgeous, and sometimes you get amazing shots
Wow, look
such
at that
as
shot.
this one. With
Yeah.
CGI on such a stunning level, Tryndamere just looks like a real human being.
Yeah.
But yes, he deflects arrows from the lamp and fights off the wolf, because today is not his day. Another thing to point out here is that the wolf
Kindred's so
has feet,
sick.
which he normally doesn't.
I never realized that detail.
That's a cool detail. And yes, eventually, Tryndamere's Undying Rage kicks in, which is when you can start noticing some more details. First of all, when Tryndamere charges the lamb, it is awesome to see the wolf dash in to protect her. But then Tryndamere actually gets to shatter her bow, which immediately reforms back in her hand because you can't stop death. In this scene, you can also see the lamb slightly tilt her head in curiosity. It is obvious the lamb and the wolf came here to claim Tryndamere's life. But now they realize this might not be possible, which is where the confusion comes from. Immediately after that, the wolf bites into Tryndamere's shoulder. And you'll see that from that point on, the shoulder pad actually stays damaged. This is an important detail, so pay attention to it. And to really just say screw you, when the lamp tries to snipe Tryndamere in the back, he just casually parries the arrow with his hand as the Undying Rage goes on. The fight then continues for a little bit longer, before the lamp finally decides that today is not Tryndamere's day. After which we get 2 arrows from Ash flying by her, which is a slight reference to Ash's volley ability. And the arrows stick into 2 Winter's Claw warriors behind Tryndamere, which is capped off with the image of the lamp dissolving.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't think I even noticed that the arrows came from behind Kindred. I was like thinking maybe he thought he was fighting death, but instead, like maybe this friend was like coming in and trying to like wake him up or something like that. Like I can't remember like what I thought at that exact moment, but I did not recognize that the arrows came from behind. I think I had thought that the arrows came from the lamb.
Oath-sworn wife who came in to rescue him.
Oh, his wife?
That's right. Tryndamere's oath-sworn wife who came in to rescue him. That's right, the 2 are married, although at first they just got married for political reasons. The love came later. Now, this dissolving image is actually hinting at what is really happening here. especially when you combine it with the fact that in the next scene, Trindamir's shoulder pad is still
it's
damaged, despite the damaging being caused by the wolf, which supposedly happened in the Death Realm. Well, in theory, this would show you that all of this was only happening in Trindamir's head. While in his mind he was fighting death itself, in reality, in the outside world, Trindamir was fighting the other warriors of the Winter's Claw. This would be why the damage on his shoulder pad stayed physical. It was actually caused by his real enemies. He just imagined them to look like the wolf. And on top of that, I do believe that's why the image of the lamb dissolved into ash. It was all to show us that Trindamir only imagined his enemies to look like the lamb and the wolf. And when Ash arrived, she broke the illusion. To really confirm that this is what happened, you can go back to the very beginning of this cinematic for another detail. When Trindamir was laying there at the brink of death, when he looked into the distance, despite many people believing that this was the lamb, now we know this was more likely just Ash, and she was only seconds away from him. The thing is, in that scene, Trindamir was surrounded by 6 other warriors. But when Ash arrived, she only killed 2 of them, despite the field already being clean. The cinematic specifically zooms out to show us that everyone's dead. Which means that Trindamir did kill the rest of the warriors while in his undying rage. Which finally brings us to the final scene, where Ash
that moment though with like Aeochox and this what do you call him, Trendamir? It's still kind of confusing, like why his eyes get red and why he has this like undying, what do you call it, undying wish or something like that. Like it's still kind of fuzzy to me, but I appreciate all of this explanation nonetheless.
her hawk eye into the sky to signal the Avarosans to come in and pick them up. You can see that this is in fact her hawk eye because the arrow actually turns into a hawk. It also
That's
gets
dope.
the sound effect, and it reveals that there are more warriors coming for them.
Oh.
And so, this is the Still Here cinematic explained. I absolutely
Thank
love this
you.
one because every time you watch it, you notice something new. We spent 3 hours going through this on stream to make sure that we really
3
pick up most of the
hours.
details. But I wouldn't
That's
be surprised
dedication.
if more things were still coming up. Massive shout out to Riot for actually giving us a fully canonical cinematic, which did wonders to the community. Though I have to point out, there were some issues with this cinematic. Yasuo draws a line in the dirt, but mysteriously in the next scene it disappears. And Ash kills 2 people with her arrows, but later on you can only see 1. 0 out of 10. This cinematic is ruined.
Oh gosh. I really appreciated the clarification that explanation video gave me. Once again, I had some things wrong in there, but I'm really proud of myself that I was able to at least recognize a couple of the characters. So that's a win in my books. But alright guys, I guess that's all I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching. Please give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. Comment down below. I love hearing from you guys. Subscribe for more content, and I'll see y'all for the next one.